My name is Martha Maurer with KTAR News and KTAR.com. This is a special series to understand the current state of immigration enforcement in Arizona. I sat down with the director of the field office division here in Phoenix of ICE to understand everything from the check-in process to deportation to raids and many more topics. In this first part, we dive in a little bit deeper into the check-in process. What happens when immigrants check in with ICE, how they end up getting deported, and does it matter if they have a criminal record or not? In recent history, recent months in the state of Arizona, we've heard of these so-called check-ins, moments where immigrants have gone into a scheduled meeting with ICE at an ICE office, and in many cases their attorneys have come out to say, my client has been deported, has been sent back to their home country. Can you clarify what is the process for somebody to even end up checking in with ICE?
Sure. So first of all, every case is really based on individual circumstances. So every case is evaluated on a case-by-case basis. Many things are considered, whether a person should be detained, whether they're eligible for a bond, whether they should be put on an ankle monitoring bracelet, or just required check-ins every 3 or 6 months. So a lot of investigation goes into making those decisions by ICE officers. But yes, there's been cases where people check in, and they may have checked in 2 or 3 times, and deportation officers are making decisions based on should they be taken into custody and removed. So it's important to remember, if you're checking in, that means you've already been identified by ICE, that you are in the country without authorization, that you may be subject already to a final order of removal issued by an immigration judge. There are times where we've allowed people to remain in the communities with reporting requirements so that they can get their affairs in order, meaning you have 30 days to make a plan for yourself, whether it's you're going to move your possessions to your home country or give them to a relative, to quit your job if you're working, to let other family members know, yes, it's time for me to go. And that's generally the case. So there's no really surprises when people check in and they're detained, and if they're from Mexico, they could be removed even the same day.
When they do get to that point where they are removed, however, do you, in your capacity or ICE, do you have the ability to make a decision to say, this person is here illegally, has been ordered removed, but doesn't have a criminal record. They should stay with their families that have built potentially a life here in the U.S. Do you have that ability?
Well, we have the ability to grant certain things, but our core mission revolves around the law, enforcing the law, and immigration judges' decisions. So, in I would say 99% of these cases where people are checking in, they've exhausted all of their appeals, that a judge has ordered them removed. They may have went to the Board of Immigration Appeals, and that case has been dismissed. They've been to the Ninth Circuit to appeal their case, and that has been dismissed. So they've gone generally through an exhaustive process that's years and years of going to court, and there's no relief. There's actually no possibility of becoming a lawful permanent resident and then eventually a U.S. citizen. So there has to be some closure into a case. Someone, just because they haven't been convicted of a crime in the United States, if they've gone through this process, they've entered the country illegally to get here, that's a federal crime already. They just haven't actually more than likely been prosecuted for that crime, but several people do every single day from just entering without inspection. Granted, it's a misdemeanor crime, it is a crime. So anyone that ICE is removing, people should know they've committed a criminal act.
So there is no difference between a person who does not have a serious criminal offense on their record but is here illegally than another person who is a convicted felon per se and is at this stage of removal. They are subject to removal.
There is no class that is exempt a category from being removed. So if they're in the United States without authorization, they're subject to removal regardless if they've been convicted of a crime or not. Now, if you have been convicted of a crime, then it's more than likely you're not going to be checking in. You're probably going to be detained depending on what that criminal conviction has been. So it does make a difference as far as how we make custody determinations. At the end of the day, we're enforcing, immigration law that was passed by Congress with people that are not authorized to remain in the United States, we will effectuate their removal.
Now, in some cases, and I've spoken to some families who say, my mom or dad had a scheduled check-in. If we would have known that we're not going to have extra time to get there first in order, perhaps they wouldn't have gone. Are you afraid that fewer people will be checking in because there is no distinction whether you have committed a crime or not? What's the plus side for them to actually follow the rules and say, I'm going to check in with ICE as I'm told?
Well, one, no, I'm not worried that if people are maybe in fear that they may be detained if they check in. I think every person that is in this country illegally already knows that's a possibility. That by coming to the United States, you're subject to removal from the United States if you don't have authorization. So I don't think that's a surprise to anyone. I think that there is some instances when people don't check in because of that fear. I think the majority of people that we're allowing to be out on orders of supervision that check in is because we've already established that they're not a high flight risk. That's the reason that they're able to check in versus being held in an ICE detention facility. So we already have a presumption that they're going to check in when required, and in most instances they've already proven that. So there are cases when they're out on bond and that they don't check in, will breach that bond. But no, I think that it's fair that people should come to the idea that they have a plan in place that today when I check in, I may not be coming home. I may be going to an ICE detention facility. I may be removed from the United States today. They should be aware of that, especially when they're represented by attorneys who gives them that possibility as well. And they already know they've been ordered removed by an immigration judge, so there's no surprise that they may not be coming home today.
There is criticism by groups, immigration rights groups and others, who say ICE is misusing resources, or instead of focusing on people who, yes, are here illegally, but perhaps don't have criminal records, that you should be going out instead towards getting those violent criminals, gang members, convicted felons. How do you respond to that criticism?
One, I don't think that they know the breadth of what ICE does, and that is our number one priority. That one, we're going after national security threats, and then two, convicted criminals. So every day in Arizona, I have fugitive operations teams that are looking for criminal aliens that are living in the communities, that have been convicted of crimes in the U.S. or are wanted in other countries for crimes that they have alleged to commit. So that is happening daily. It is our top priority, and I think that ICE is making communities safer by targeting these individuals. At the same time, it is our job and what we're appropriated to do from Congress to enforce immigration laws. So again, we are not exempting any one class from that possibility of being put into removal proceedings and eventually removed from the United States, but we are doing targeted enforcement operations, targeting criminals and the worst criminals first.
When a person refuses to check in to their scheduled time with ICE, what's the next step that you take?
If they have not checked in and they've missed their appointment, they become an immigration fugitive. So immediately that case is now handed over to our fugitive operations team, and they go on that docket, and based on what the teams are doing at the time and of the circumstance of the individual we're looking for, they prioritize targeting those individuals. So if you don't check in, ICE is not looking for you anymore because you didn't check in. Now you're subject to being targeted by a team that could be knocking on your doors of people that we think you may be at, or conducting surveillance looking for you. And oftentimes they're not that, individuals know that. And that's a lot of the time why they check in, because they may be living with other people that are not in the country legally, and they don't want us at their house because now we may encounter them and make an arrest because they're not in the country legally. So more times than not, that's why people check in. Of course, people may move if we don't know their last known address, but I would argue that our fugitive operations teams are the best in the business, and they are trained, and they are very good at finding people that are hiding. looking for people that don't have registered vehicles, that they don't have driver's licenses, that they're maybe working under different names, different social security numbers. It is not easy to find, but our officers are highly trained and skilled to locate these individuals, and they don't stop looking until they have their targets under arrest.
Be sure to visit KTAR.com for more on this topic, and then for the next part of our series where we talk to the director about raids in Arizona, taking sanctuary in churches, and also going after visa overstays.